So I'm going to be breaking this down by 3 different obstacles that essentially make bowls and a future of a bowl, which is a corner wall, a flat wall, and a hip. Those are the 3 different things that essentially build your line. So the first thing that we're going to get into is the corner wall. Now, in my opinion, corners are pretty much the epitome of what makes a bowl a bowl. That's kind of like what makes it extra special versus a mini ramp or a vert ramp or any other obstacle. The corners are sort of what give you speed, and they build your lines, and they sort of drive you into different directions. And one thing that I've mentioned before on my channel is using your head as a pendulum technique. So essentially you're kind of like swinging around, essentially kind of like a pendulum inside of the bowl. Your head is sort of the ball and the axle is moving around, but essentially you always want to be on the corners, on the walls, and they're going to be a big advantage for certain tricks. For example, a lip slide through a corner is actually going to be a lot easier than a lip slide on a flat wall. And the same thing goes with the backside rock and roll. I was actually just trying a bunch of rock and roll slides on this deep end corner, and I was struggling at first, but it wasn't as scary for me because I knew I could get around the corner and sort of fall into the corner. And that's what really changes from a corner to a flat wall, is that you can sort of fall and aim where you're going to land your trick or where you're going to go in. You can aim where you're going to start your trick. You can just aim it a lot easier than a normal flat wall. And the other thing is it actually keeps you in the inside. So when I'm board sliding, I'm actually in the inside. I'm not having to balance it, where a flat wall, you really do have to pinch and balance your trick a lot more, where you kind of just use the motion and the shape of the bowl to allow you to actually do the trick a lot easier. So in my opinion, certain tricks in a corner is going to be a big advantage. Lip slides, board slides, for example. Something like a tail slide is even going to be an advantage too, because you're kind of pressing through the corner versus having to actually balance your trick out. So it's more of a pinch motion. And the other thing I'll say with corners that I've noticed a lot of people do is they get a lot of speed from the corners, and then they'll go up the corner and they just lose all their speed and they kind of slowly fall down, like gravity is pushing them down. And typically that's because they're going too high up onto the walls in the corner. That's the one thing with bowls. You can actually go really low in the corners and keep a lot more speed. It's all about having your head tucked into the motion of which you're going. So if you're going backside, you want to have your head tilted in. If you're going front side, you want to have your head tilted over the other way. You never really want to have your head just straight up. You always kind of want it in one way or another. For example, this line, I had no idea where I was going. I essentially just dropped in and sort of let the walls take me wherever I went in. What I try to do is just flow with the walls. I try not to force or go against the motion. So if a wall's sending me down a certain way, I kind of just lean into that. So essentially you want to trust that gravity, momentum, everything is going in your favor. You don't want to push against it. If you're still trying to go up a wall and you're falling down, chances are you're going too high. You need to go lower and go at a wider approach. A lot of times you don't need to go up high on a wall. You can go really low and wide and get a lot more speed that way. You don't always have to go exactly through a corner exactly at its shape, meaning you don't have to start where the corner starts and end where the corner ends. You can actually go into it as almost like at an angle where you're almost crisscrossing the corner and then hit the flat wall after as well. So a lot of different ways to hit corners. I just want to sort of explain that a lower line a lot of times actually helps, and there's certain tricks on corners that are going to be a big advantage. For example, like a stand-up 5-0 through a corner is a lot easier than a flat wall, because again, it's the same thing. You're not balancing it as much and you're more pushing it through. That's a big difference, is you're kind of like pushing your tricks through the corner versus trying to balance it in a corner. So that is a big thing. And corners ultimately give you a lot of speed, and they help you find your line to other things. So whenever I see a corner, that's the first thing that I go to. I almost avoid the flat walls. The flat walls are more like, hey, I got to hit this because the corner hit me and set me to the flat wall. So yeah, highly suggest if you're trying to find lines or just get more comfortable with in bowls, it's just go low in the corners and hit every single corner and stay in the corner, essentially taking the scum line. Now, if you're having a hard time like figuring out corners or how to hit them, one thing you could do is even like throw a ball through the corner. You can see the natural motions of where the ball ends up and where it hits, where it doesn't go, at the peak of the wall, like how high it goes up and how it keeps going. So yeah, you just want to essentially use the corners and use your arms to like draw everything out. It's much more of a shape, it's much more of a forward motion in skateboarding versus like flat ground, ledges, flat rails, or anything like that. You're constantly going forward, which can work to your advantage too, because you're falling to your hips or you're falling to your knees, your butt, whatever it is. It's pretty rare that like the board is right under your feet, for example. It's because there's always a forward motion that's happening in corners. This bowl in specific, the way that I would hit this flat wall is not straight up and down. I would actually hit this corner and then hit the wall and then hit a little bit of that corner out of it. So I'm not having to go so straight up and down, because that's really scary. It's a lot easier to go to flat, and you lose a lot of speed when you hit these flat walls. So you want to try to find a good angle to them as much as you can without fully hitting the corner, because you want to hit the flat wall. You want to have your peak moment at the flat wall, but you could sort of aim it through the corner and then ending up on the flat wall. But for example, a 50-50 on a flat wall, it's a lot scarier than a corner, because you just have to be more precise. It's more of an up, down, lock, and then go back in. Where a corner, it's all one motion, so you're able to keep your speed a lot better in most cases. The other big difference with the corner and a flat wall too is that the corner, you don't have to actually lock up on top of the coping onto, you know, the very top. With the corner, you could kind of stay in the inside, 50-50, board slide, 5-0, any trick really. Kind of more inside of the coping. Or on a flat wall, you kind of do have to get more on top and you have to lock in. So with that said, it's scarier, you have to get more locked in, but also it's gonna take a lot more of your speed. So if you're having a hard time keeping speed in a bull, maybe avoid flat walls as much as you can and actually use the corners and try doing your tricks in the corner. Even if you're doing a stall trick, doesn't mean you have to slide it or grind it through the corner. You can just do your stall trick in the middle of a corner, so you're going up and you're doing it and you're getting a little more speed out of it versus just using that flat wall. However, something like a backside air on a flat wall is gonna be a big advantage. It's gonna be a lot harder on a corner. So you have your pros and cons. That's the thing that I wanted to point out in this video, is that like not every trick is going to work on the corner, not every trick is going to work on the flat wall. However, it's what you choose that's going to allow you to build up line and keep your speed. I had one more tip for the flat wall, totally just forgot it. Now the point that I'm trying to get at here is just you want to avoid those straight flat walls as much as possible when you're trying to find lines or keep speed in bowls, because normally that's sort of like the axle point, the pivotal point that will just send you into the wrong direction. So if you're gonna hit a flat wall, just think about having to hit a corner first or afterwards so that you can just keep your speed. There's nothing wrong with it. You could definitely do a lot of tricks on it. For example, a blunt fakie, a pivot fakie, lean to tail, backside air. All those tricks are great for flat walls, and you can learn a lot on a flat wall. However, it's not really utilizing the bull, and I think that's what's really going to allow you to be a more efficient bull rider, bull skater, be able to find lines, is almost avoiding the flat walls if you can. Essentially what you want to avoid is just mini ramping in a bull and hitting that flat wall, or vert ramping in a bull is what people call it. They just kind of hit the flat wall back and forth because you're not really utilizing and kind of taking advantage of the shape of the bull. Say for example you want to hit that flat wall at the very end of this bull, which is going to get you the most speed because it's kind of like a downward sort of bull the way it's set up. It's like a snaker. At the very bottom you have the most speed, you're going to hit that flat wall. What I would suggest is just making sure you hit a couple corners before hitting that flat wall, because that's also going to help with your confidence level. It's going to get your special meter up essentially. So that's kind of the one thing you want to do. If you're going to hit a flat wall, hit a couple corners first, or maybe a couple hips, which is the next thing that I definitely want to dive into. I personally have learned a lot on hips. They're almost like a hack to skating bowls in a way. You kind of think of a hip like a launch ramp in a bowl, but you're just going sideways. So you're already riding on a corner, or you're already riding that transition sideways, but then you have a jump in the middle of it. That's kind of how I think about it sometimes. So you're not so much thinking about all the churning and the radius of like going from air, churning, 180, back down. That's my point, is you can kind of go forward motion off a hip, which is really cool. If you want to learn how to do backside airs, frontside airs, 50-50s even, for example, because the point is you don't have to get to the top and churn all the way back around. Like I was saying with the flat walls, you don't have to turn all the way around. With corners, it's even a better thing. You don't have to turn all the way around. But with the hip, you almost are going straight on. For example, if I just wanted to do a 50-50, I'm almost just going right off the hip and then onto the coping. So there's less motion with my shoulders, there's less churning, there's just less going on. So it's a good way not only to learn tricks, but also to keep your speed, because what you can do is kind of pump off the hip and then pump out of the hip. And that's a really good way to keep your speed. Kind of similar to corners. It's a very unique thing to bowl. So hips and corners ultimately are what really are gonna make you a better bowl skater, utilizing those hips and utilizing those corners. And with hips, you can go low to high, or you can go high to low. The one thing that you do wanna think about when you're going off the hip is you don't wanna go off the very edge and go to the right, because then you're gonna go to flat. So it's really about thinking about you're wanting to ride along the side of the hip and you're staying in the transition. So again, it's kind of like there's a launch ramp and you're just on the side of the wall. So hips are a really good way to learn tricks, keep your speed, and also to build lines. I highly suggest learning airs on hips. for example, or learning how to even get into grinds properly on hips is a really good way. You can really use hips to learn tricks, and they might seem more intimidating, they might seem scary, like it's a scary obstacle, but when you really think about it, it's a lot more easy. There's less hang up factor, for example, with airs. There's a lot of different things that you can do, even airing to fakie, so many different options. So definitely utilize those hips along with those corners. They're the two most crucial parts of bowl skating. Ultimately, the goal is just to utilize the actual features that are in a bowl versus a mini ramp or vert ramp or anything like that. Hopefully this video give a little bit of an insight of how to utilize those certain things and how to build lines. That's essentially what I'm really getting at, and I want to end this video with, is like, you can use those corners, you can even use those flat walls, and you can use all those hips to really build your lines, get you speed. And with bowl skating, it's not so trick oriented. It's a lot about, you know, you want to hit 4 or 5 walls and then do the trick that you're trying to do, because not only is it going to get your special meter, your confidence up, but it's going to allow you to get more efficient with the bowl, learn how to keep your speed, how to get more speed when you're losing speed, how to get more, all those different things, how to hang up, how to chuck bash. All that stuff will happen within time if you really just start utilizing those corners, those hips, and those flat walls. As much as I say avoid the flat walls, there's the last things you want to hit, but hopefully all these different sort of etiquette talks about how you use these different obstacles within a bowl can give you confidence to go out there and enjoy some bowl skating, whether you're beginner, expert, pro, anything like that. So if you guys enjoy this video, make sure you smash that like button underneath. Appreciate it. See y'all next one. Mash.